Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome to the MS Guide. I'm Dominic, I've had MS for 31 years, and I run this channel completely off my own back. I'd be really grateful if you could, for less than a cup of coffee, support me on Patreon, and the link is there on the screen. And yeah, there you go, there's a cup of coffee. You see our distinguished guest drinking what we speak. Today we're going to talk about, essentially, magic insoles, and that's going to start for us right now. So we have Bruce Ford, who's the CEO of Celestia Health. You would have heard of Celestia Health, but Bruce, hi, and tell us a bit about Celestia. Why are we talking today?
Yeah, well, I'd say first of all, my wife is a MS neurologist, and I blame this on the pandemic, but we had so much time on our hands during lockdown that I started asking her all these questions about what she does as part of her job. And I've worked in tech all my life, so I've got 30-ish, I'm not going to give away my age, 30-ish years working in the software industry. And, the more she described some of the challenges of her job, the more it became evident that there was a great opportunity here to apply technology that would help MS patients and, by extension, help MS neurologists do their job better. So,
Guys,
yeah.
This is AI-powered insoles. I'm serious, it's AI-powered insoles. So this is what we're talking about today, because walking with MS, as we all know, is a serious issue for most of us to a greater or lesser extent.
Yep.
And I think from your pandemic discussions, you've come up with a tech way to help, yeah?
Exactly. So, we focused on multiple sclerosis because, as everyone knows, as the disease progresses, it's quite common. In fact, it's pretty much happens to everyone that your walking will get worse as your disease progresses. And we looked at it and realized that there's no scientific objective way to measure a gait, especially over time. And the other issue is,
do you mean when we go for our annual appointment and you often have a timed 25-foot walk, where the neurologist either walks beside you or watches you or whatever, usually in the hallway of the hospital? And that's, that's it, isn't it? Right. Okay. So that's what you're talking about. It's this annual walk that you do where they look at it and go, oh, Dominic's the same. Dominic's got worse. Dominic's better.
Right. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why doing a once a year, timed 25-foot walk, which takes about, I think on average takes an MS patient 9 seconds. So to actually measure somebody for 9 seconds out of a potential of 365 days of the year, it is not a very valid marker. But at the same time, if you talk to neurologists and you ask about the various aspects of, whether it's cognition or fatigue or bladder control or whatever, they'll typically say that walking is the most important measure. And you talk to patients and they'll say that from a quality of life perspective, walking is the number one factor. So there's no question that walking is important. And yet at the same time, they have this, 9-second test, and you could be having a good day or a bad day. And the other thing, and I'm sure many of you have been through this, when somebody is testing you, you tend to push yourself, right? So often the spouse of the person that's there goes, wait a minute, you'd never walk like that at home. So what we want to do is be able to sort of capture your walking, like when you're walking to the mailbox, like something indicative of how you normally walk. And
Bruce, I'm going to interrupt you for a second again.
Sure.
I mean, I think as MS patients, we're used to some of these things, which is just like, well, that's what we do. And you're thinking, like you said, 9 seconds out of 365 days. I'm not going to do the maths because I can't, but it's absurd, isn't it? And then you're right. Somebody says, do this. It's like 9-hole peg test. I am determined to go as fast as I can. There's just something in my brain which says, right, this is a test. Got to do your best.
Well,
and it's insane. But guys, the thing that really got me about these insoles, and Bruce is coming at this from the, no offense, Bruce, the tech entrepreneur's point of view, is we see a doctor on average about once a year if we're lucky. And in the meantime, various things can happen, various things can capture. I don't know about you, but I'm terrible. Everyone says, write it down for your appointment. And I think, oh, damn, I should have written it down. These feed in to the cloud, which we're all aware of, and your doctor can see what's going on with your gait on a daily basis if they want to, or they can just set an alert up, I presume, and have some deterioration show up. Essentially, this is a way that your doctor gets information on you on a nearly daily basis based on your walking. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. The idea is
Right.
you put the insoles, like here's a pair. We use a third party to produce these. So they're packed with sensors. They've got Bluetooth, they've got pressure sensors, accelerometer, gyroscope, etc. And you put
Go
them
on,
in.
tell us how many measurements how many times a second and how many measurements do they take? That's what floored me.
Yeah. Well, right now we're taking 50 measurements a second, and we're contemplating moving it up to 100, just so that we can provide equivalence with some of the state-of-the-art gait laboratory equipment, but honestly, it won't make much of a difference. And then we take 200 measurements. So 200 different aspects of your walking are measured every 1/50th of a second. Yeah. And yeah, so you can do the math.
I've never met a doctor that can do that, frankly. It's
yeah, well, exactly. And we have AI algorithms. I mean, we are a software company. We use some off-the-shelf wearable hardware, and we take the data and we crunch it. And we've got a very large database now of MS, persons with MS walking. I call it in the wild, or you could say under free living conditions, but basically doing what they normally do, just leading their lives. And
just in hospital, not walking down the hallway and being timed, just going about life, like you say.
yeah, and
every day, is that right? Every
well,
day.
we like
If the patient does it every day, or they can do.
We'd like to get a 15-minute walking sample 3 times a week. That's what our current goal is. We may change that based on the kind of data that we get back, but so far that seems like more than enough. In fact, it might be more than we need. But yeah,
Bruce,
and
I think it's important to say. I think it's
Yep.
really important to say. I've got a walking device, something called an Exoband, which is really cool. But I have to put it on. I have to plan. It only works, so we say, under certain light. If I'm going to go for a walk, these, bang them in your shoes, connect them on your phone. That's it. Yeah, they're essentially insoles. I mean, folks, as a disclaimer, I've been testing some. I walked around London all day with them in my shoes. It's just like they're insoles. They're nothing special. They're insoles. That's the nice thing, is there's nothing to think about. You press go, that's it.
Yeah, and that's
the algorithm's the magic, isn't it?
Yeah, and we have a team of I call them postdocs, so they're all PhDs, and they work. It's a state-of-the-art gait laboratory. It cost about $10 million to build this thing, and they have some of the best technology at their fingertips, and they've developed algorithms that they have in fact tuned specifically for multiple sclerosis patients. So they've
all that data. Sorry, all that data that the doctor is seeing ultimately is run through these incredibly sort of sophisticated MS-specific algorithms. Because frankly, hardware is hardware, but the magic's in the algorithm, isn't it? Somebody can't go and copy your algorithm; they can go and copy your insoles, but the algorithm is what's telling the doctor.
Yeah, I mean the insoles have to be comfortable, so they have to be thin. They have to have just basic sensors, off-the-shelf components. So that accelerometer, the gyroscope, the Bluetooth, the pressure sensors. But it's what we do with it. And the more, everyone knows this about AI, the more subjects that you can train it on, and the bigger your data set, the more accurate the algorithms become. So we're working in Canada, in the US, in the UK, of course, and now starting in Germany, to gather data from MS patients walking in the wild. And
in clinical trial setting, though, aren't you? I mean, it's all, this is sort of, should we say, super duper above board. This isn't like a couple of people with a clipboard making it up as they go along. This is a clinical trial setting in Ottawa, London, Germany, you say, and the States somewhere. But so I mean, like our drugs, it's a clinical trial.
Yeah, exactly. And as I've learned the hard way, clinical trials take a long time to plan and a long time to execute, and they tend to be very expensive.
And
But
they keep
it's
getting delayed. I'm on the board of a couple, and they're
yeah,
one little hiccup. Oh well, that's 4 weeks gone. You
well,
know,
exactly. But, I mean, you want
yeah,
to do it as you said, above board, and you want to make sure it's done
yeah,
properly, and
sure.
you've got statisticians that are properly trained, and you've got a large enough sample size, et cetera, to make sure the
Mm.
results are valid. So, yeah. So anyway, we're
You
pretty
prove it.
happy with the. What's that?
Sorry, so then you prove it. Then you can go out and it's not like, should we say, these slightly bogus health claims you see from things, wear a copper bracelet, all your problems will go away. It's like, this is a
Yeah,
clinical trial.
exactly.
And the
Yep.
point is, this isn't something that I go and buy, is it? This is something essentially that's run through the doctors or the MS clinics or whatever, and they say, Dominic, we'd like you to wear these and use these.
Yeah, exactly. And uh not that I want to be negative about it, but there are a lot of apps out there, MS specific apps that allow you to call it journaling, right? They capture your symptoms and how you're feeling from day to day and what your mood is and how much exercise you've done. And that has some value, don't get me wrong, but unless it's being shared with your neurologist, there's a lot of value that's not being, you know, capitalized on. And the other thing is neurologists want things to be fairly concise. They want to just take a quick look and know what's going on. And if it's
As
too
your wife
verbal,
will tell you, they've got so many patients. There's probably in Canada, like in the UK, not enough neurologists for the MS patients out there already. So, yeah, I mean, then they're not going to read through everybody's journaling or whatever. They just want bang, Dominic's okay, Dominic's stable. Does this pre-warn the doctor? So would it say, for example, hey, Mrs. Ford, check it out. Dominic's just suddenly taken a sharp decline.
yeah, no,
Right.
exactly. And
Right.
the first thing we did with our clinical trials was to prove that the walking metrics. I mentioned 200. Some of these we've sort of calculated ourselves, and they're fairly obscure, like root mean squared error of your asymmetry. It's like that doesn't mean much to most people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But if you go into one of these gate labs there, and you can even look on, for example, your Apple iPhone, and buried in there in your health settings, not that it's particularly accurate, but they have things like double support time and single support time and stride length. Those at least are a little more commonplace. So the first thing we did, we just proved that our algorithms have almost near perfect correlation with the state of the art gate lab. So that just basically proves that, the metrics, the standard metrics, we've nailed them. So we've got that exactly the way we need that. So that
And
was
a
step
gate
one.
lab, I don't want to insult anybody, but a gate lab, I don't know. I mean, I've been in one once, but these are these special things. They put markers all over you. The cameras, all these different cameras film you. You walk up and down.
Yeah,
There's pressure plates. There's all kind of. So essentially, the Insoles are taking over from these incredibly complex gate labs. You're now working out that you can get the same results with Insoles.
that's exactly it. And so that was step
That's
one.
cool.
Step two was just for that, walking to the mailbox or walking down the street. We wanted to assign for each walking session, say 15-minute duration, a score, something very simple between 0 and 100.
Can you
And
show
every
me
time you
this?
go for a walk, yeah, you get a score.
Right.
And we've tuned it for MS patients. So it pulls out some of those, I call them metrics or variables that,
So I get
uh,
the score on my
yeah,
on my phone as well.
yeah. So you'll get a little dot showing you what the relative score is, and
Uh-huh.
every day you'll be able to see if it's getting better, if it's getting worse, and we do expect some variability, but it'll also show you the trend line
Mm-hmm.
over 3 months, over 6 months, so you'll be able to see for yourself how your walking
Right.
quality, and the walking quality considers all aspects. It's your balance, it's your speed, it's your stride length, it's your asymmetry, all that stuff. It looks at things like foot drops and things. And we've also, by the way, tested it with healthy controls, and we've tested it with Parkinson's patients, and it works really, really well. So that was
Hey, I know you've been a healthy control. I know you've been marching around with them, whereas I've been testing a pair. So, but Bruce, so I
Yeah,
see something from me, the patient, and my doctor sees something which I presume is a little more sort of detailed because they know about it. You know,
yeah,
it's very unlikely that you're going to have MS and be a walking specialist. Not impossible, but unlikely. But the doctors are
yeah.
going to know more, and they're going to get a different data set than me.
Well, yes. So they'll have the actual score, and if they want to
Hmm.
double click on the score, they can then see
Right.
those key variables that are influencing the score. But as you said, I mean, neurologists in particular, they're not gait specialists.
No.
Um, so that leads me to the third thing, and the third thing we're doing right now, and we're just training our algorithms, is to basically pick up things like ataxia. So that's a lack of coordination of your muscles, and to actually rate it on your left versus your right side, and to say things like it's moderate, it's mild, it's barely perceptible, it's severe. If you're doing foot drops, for those of you that experience foot drops, we can capture that, and so to provide some actually objective data, yeah, and
Yeah.
it'll basically tell you if your foot drops are increasing, and it also show you if your fatigue is changing. So what we've seen in all MS patients is that the further the walk, and maybe this is healthy controls to some extent, depending how far the distance is, but your walking gets worse, and you start to
Hmm.
exhibit some of these walking behaviors that you normally wouldn't see unless you're fatigued. So we can say,
Mate, I
wow,
get
you're
up
at,
in the I get up in the
yeah,
morning and think, what am I getting so stressed about? I don't need my cane and stuff. And by lunchtime, it's like, where did I leave my bloody cane? I've got to go up the road, to the mailbox, like you say, or something simple. And the
yeah,
difference between, say, morning and afternoon is quite. But the nice thing, these track it 3 times a week or every day or whatever, but you can't do that if you're going to the doctor once a year, just so you can just give general remarks. Whereas these, well, sure. I mean, the reason I asked you on the podcast was I think this is astonishing because AI is letting us do things like AI and MRI is just better at seeing things
yeah,
than the
yeah,
naked eye and the human being. And it changes the conversation with the doctor because all of a sudden, some of the workload for them is being reduced. They don't need to ever do a 25-foot walking test when they see me because they've got data from me 3 days a week, ping, and they can even sort of summon me if they see a sort of marked deterioration. I mean, I had a relapse about 4 months ago, and it wasn't one of the gradual ones. It was like being chucked down a flight of stairs, and
yeah.
if I hadn't said anything to my doctor, they would have just gone, what's gone on? I lost about 20% of the sensation in my right leg almost overnight. And it was a bit of a shock.
Oh my
But
God.
the doctor would have
Yep.
seen it,
Yep.
and
Oh,
so I just
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
that it's really cool, So
Yeah.
what's the next step? Can you give people any sort of, because we've been chatting away for nearly 20 minutes. Can you give people an insight into, but oh, by the way, everybody, I'll back up one. All the in the show description, in the show notes, or in the YouTube description, I'm going to put the Celestia website, the clinical trials details, because if you're anywhere near that and want to take part in the clinical trials, I'm pretty sure they're starting to recruit.
Yep.
Uh, but Bruce, when's this going to be something that your doctor's going to say to you, "Hey, Dom, it's essentially a medical device. What I'd be really pleased is if you could wear these insoles in your shoes, and we can do that." I mean, at what stage are we at? Whether it's in the US or in the UK or whatever, when that
Yeah.
conversation is going to happen.
Yeah. So we're pretty close. So we're now working with the regulatory bodies. We started with
Right.
the FDA. Everyone's heard about
Hmm.
the FDA,
Oh yeah.
and they're pretty exacting in terms of the data they need to see and the sample size and everything else. So we're hopeful that we'll get our first approval by the end of this year.
Right.
And
2024. So end of 2024, we're looking at the first approval from the FDA.
yeah, and there'll be a
Right. Okay.
second approval around the middle of next year.
Right.
And the FDA like to engage you early. In the EU, they have this EU MDR, so we're working with them as well to get certified. And then, of course, the UK have their own It's no longer part of the EU. They,
This is not a political podcast, but
uh,
what a
they have their
crazy
own
thing that we
regulatory
ever
body.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there we go. So we're going to work
Yeah.
with them as
So,
well.
so essentially in the UK, hey folks, if you're in the UK like me, Brexit, sunny, sunlit uplands, or maybe not, but that's going to that's as political as I'm going to get. But that means
Yeah,
that we're looking. Would it be fair to say in 2026, probably?
yeah, yeah. So the back half of 2025. But
Right.
we are doing trials now, and we're always looking for for interested persons with MS to help us out and to get involved.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
you can
that's
go to
what
our
I'm
website.
doing. I'm getting ahead of the curve. I beat the drum
Yeah,
for clinical trials because I just think things like this, you get insight earlier.
yeah, yeah,
And it's just, well, and I think AI is pretty cool. I'm a bit of a nerd. Well, I'm a lot of a nerd with that, but it's that's
yeah,
amazing. So Bruce, we were talking earlier, and you were showing me some charts and some videos and stuff. So,
yeah.
guys, if you're listening to the podcast, it's best in the podcast description. I'll put the YouTube link because I also put this up on YouTube. So jump over, and I'm going to append them to the video. So Bruce, can you show us those now and just talk us through those two things, please? Because again,
Yeah.
if you're on the podcast, jump onto YouTube to see what Bruce is about to be talking about.
Sounds good. Okay, and let's hope that this this software that we're using is going to work the way we want it to. But
Bruce is in
let's.
Canada and I'm in the UK, so cross your fingers, everyone.
There you go. Okay,
Hey,
so you can see this, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So
So what are we looking at?
yeah. So getting back to my discussions with my wife, the MS neurologist during COVID. This is the problem
I
that she
called
was
her
describing.
Mrs. Ford. I should have called her Dr. Ford, at least.
Well, she has her own. She has her own name, so she's not even a Dr.
Ah,
Ford. She's a
see,
doc.
I screwed up on more
doc
than one level then. Or is she a professor?
there we go. So
Right, I'll
yeah. So
stop
I've just
digging.
so objectively measuring gait is critical. Like I've already talked about that, but it's also
Yeah,
inherently complex. So take a look at this video. So this is taken from our gait lab, and this gives you an idea of the software that we use. So this is an MS patient, and they're doing well. This is even less than 9 seconds. So they're walking, and you can see their balance is a little bit off, and their arms are you know outstretched.
slightly out
So
to the side. That's what I do. You balance yourself by putting your arms out a little bit wider.
yeah. So the state of the
Yeah.
art today, is that you do this once a year, and then
Mm.
your neurologist is basically watching you do that walk and taking notes, and they're trying to describe with enough precision all aspects of your walking, so that when you come back in a year's time, they can determine whether or not your walking has changed. That is, hopefully, it's obvious. That's an impossible task. Like there's no way. And many neurologists will say, well, that the patient's saying that they think their walking's getting worse, but I'm looking at my notes and it doesn't seem any different. And it puts them in a very tough position, like what to do. Is it getting worse or isn't it? They have no way to objectively measure it. So that's the problem. The first option, of course, is what I've just shown you, but it's subjective. And we know
Mm.
that patients have good days and bad days, and we know that their walking can change by plus or minus 20%. And the other option is to send the patients to one of these gait labs, but it's rarely done because it's a separate visit, first of all, and it's really expensive. These labs aren't cheap, and they have technicians and everything else, so it's rarely done.
I've
So
never been sent to a gait lab. I had a mate who was a physio, and we were chatting one day because I'd broken my femur badly before. And so essentially, this is an after work here. Let's have a go at this. But it was just,
yeah,
wow. Yeah, I mean, the money. I mean, you just look at them, folks. If you look at a gait lab and you walk in the door and all you can sort of smell is the cost of everything people, equipment, what have you.
see, I
Yeah.
learned. I didn't realize that cost had a cent, but clearly it does.
Oh, you smell money, Bruce. You're not trying.
I guess so. And this is the other thing I wanted to show is just so I talked about that scale because we
Right.
wanted to put things in simple terms. So each of these green dots represents a 15-minute walk. So as I mentioned, we just every time you go for a walk, we just give it a score between whatever 1 and 100. And along the top we have a healthy control, and you can see this over a 100-day period that their walking is pretty consistent, even though sometimes they're walking indoors, sometimes outdoors, up and down stairs, through doors, you name it, turning.
But you'd
And then we
expect
noticed,
that. I mean, if you haven't got MS, it's just like, why would your walking suddenly deteriorate over 100 days?
yeah, exactly. And then we noticed that, like, on this one day, there were a couple of outliers.
Mm.
And sure enough, we checked the notes, because every time you take a walk, you have an opportunity to add a quick note if there's something unusual about it. And sure enough, this person had pulled their left calf muscle 48 hours earlier. And they said,
Oh,
I think my walking is normal, but my calf is a little bit sore. And the fact of the matter is, we picked it up. We were actually pleasantly surprised with the sensitivity of what we're able to measure. So that's a healthy control. And then along the bottom
well,
is
can
one
I
of
just
the
add some humor to
participants
this,
in.
Bruce? Bruce, you're talking
Sure.
about the notes, yeah? I'm not a healthy control, but
Yeah.
I was testing a set of these insoles for you, and I wrote, I'm just going to the pub. I'm just coming home from the pub, and apparently, and I only had a couple of beers, it was noticeable, wasn't it? Because you rang me up and said, I like your notes. We could see you've been to the pub.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
That's how good they are.
yeah, and I did show it to some of my colleagues, and they got a good laugh out. And yeah,
The
and
thing
then
is, the
along the
problem with
bottom is,
MS is you look like you're hammered, even if you're not. Yeah, it's just,
well,
a
yeah, no,
couple of
and
beers and
and
you're all over the place.
and I mean, it's a serious thing, right?
Mm.
I've spoken to MS patients that have told me that it's there's a big stigma. Like in the afternoon, their walking would get so bad
Yep.
that it looked like they were drunk, and
Mm.
it's a huge problem. And then yeah, along the
Yeah.
bottom, we over a 100-day period, we have another MS patient. You can see their scores are much lower. That's not always the case, but this this patient had significant walking disability, and you can see over the 100 days there's a pronounced deterioration of their walking. They started off in the 30 range and they ended up in the 20. And there are some outliers. And one of the things, as our algorithms are being retrained and continually trained on the new data, we're getting a little tighter and tighter in terms of the outliers, but some
Yeah.
outliers are expected. As I said, the plus or minus 20% per day.
But Bruce, the
But yeah,
thing to take from this is over 100 days, there is an obvious issue, whatever it is.
yeah,
I don't, maybe the person had an infection, maybe they were getting tighter and tighter and they're fatigued. Who knows? I'm not a doctor, but essentially over 100 days, there was a significant change in their walking. This is what excites me, because if the doctor could go, good grief, Dominic's walking's taking a turn from the worse, it it could be a case of, let's get you in and sort of talk to you, have a bit of a better check, but something's happening. It's not nothing's happening. The technology is showing that something is happening, something worthwhile knowing about.
Exactly. And one of the surprises for me is that we've actually seen some of the participants in our trial, their walking's getting better. Now, that could be they're on a new drug therapy, but
Yeah.
based on some of the questionnaires that the participants are filling in, they're telling us that they're walking more. Like, this is motivating them to walk more. And the more they walk, the better their walking is becoming. And that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing.
No, but
So,
then it still tells the doctor something. It's positive reinforcement. It's like, look, I can see the effort you're putting in, and guess what? Your walking's improving. It's just, it's sort of, I struggle to see a downside, frankly. I mean, oh no, I do. Everything costs money. Health systems have to fund it. It's like that. But being able to give better care to patients, if we put the cost of stuff aside, this enables
yeah,
doctors to give better care to MS patients or Parkinson's patients or whatever it is. I mean, I think of a friend with
yeah,
Parkinson's who's had to stop running, and she's, funnily enough, taken up roller skating. I'm not sure the insoles are geared up for that, but to try and keep her balance. But
yeah. I
it's
could see some
it
funny things if you
yeah,
ran around with roller skates and you
the
go
roller
down a
skating
hill. It would,
algorithm, yeah. But yeah,
yeah,
Bruce,
you need to
that's so
work on that.
cool. So
Yeah,
we've covered the timescales. Like I said, folks, if you're still listening to the podcast, you can jump on YouTube. But essentially, Bruce showed us two things. One was a video of one of those things you see, the sort of, it was turned into the skeleton sort of shape walking, and that was really cool because you could see how the insoles are reporting it back like a gate lab. And the second thing was essentially two graphs: the healthy control looking pretty normal over 100 days, and then the person with MS starting to go downhill for whatever reason over 100 days. And that's the application of technology that can tell that. Anything else, that you think this is really going to turn into?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of a lot of interesting stuff happening. So, I mean,
Right.
one of them is that it's something as simple as um, getting an assistive device and seeing if it's doing what it's supposed to do. So, let's
Right.
say you're analyzing the data and you go, I think I left a stick or a cane, whatever you want to call it, is going to help. You can see exactly how it's helping, and maybe make
And the
adjustments.
different length of cane is just the right length of cane for you. And, on my
It,
cane is what they call TLAR, which is that looks about right. And
yeah, yeah. So we
and I've
can
had
be
one neuro go it's too short, one neuro go it's too long. So I think it's probably just about right. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. And
right,
the other area is rehabilitation. And I know a
right,
lot of people with MS who's going to rehab, and they have the same issues. It's very hard to subjectively,
right,
you know, or today it's sort of subjective, but it's very hard to objectively observe somebody and to see if their therapy is working properly. So
right. So a couple
this is
things to look
another,
forward to. So
yeah,
sorry, the couple of things to look forward to. So devices or assistance and rehab, but that's sort of an indeterminate point in the future. But we know that's where we're going to go. But right now, today, we've got these insoles. Check the description of the YouTube or check the show notes because I will put the details of the trials in there and the Celestial website, obviously. But Bruce, thanks so much for taking the time to come on today and explain this to us.
my pleasure. Anytime.
All right. See you soon. Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye bye.